You're good.
Okay. All right. Seeing the presence of a quorum, I'll call to order this meeting of the Pelham School Committee at 6:32, and we'll start with roll call attendance. Ron.
Menino present.
Sarah Best.
Kenny present.
Margaret.
Stanser present.
Brenda.
Barlow present.
And Hall present. All right. Next up is approving the minutes. So we have everything except January 14th. That was a CLO just hasn't had a chance to get to that yet. So we can take care of that next month. So we can just go in order, starting with August 6th. Any questions, comments? Yep, Margaret. You're muted, Margaret.
Just a typo under preschool discussion in the second line. It says continent. I think it should be contingent.
Oh, yeah. Yes, thank you.
Mm-hmm. And on the next paragraph, about midway, the line starts, and we could vote to have this run in, the next line down, could call this a hiatus and not say we are terminating.
Yes. Yeah, I had that too.
Okay. Yeah.
Any other comments, corrections? I had just one. It just looks like after the vote, then there's two more sentences, starting with Mr. Menino asked if this fee, and it is both. It seemed like we had already voted. I think maybe that was pulled over from something else. Or Ron, do you remember asking?
I don't remember.
Yeah, I did not check the tape. I mean, it seems like it should be deleted, that maybe it was just something. Does anyone have any objection to?
It's fine by me.
Okay. Yep. Sarah Beth?
I think that just happened before we voted. I think we did have that conversation about it, but I think that happened previous.
Okay. So maybe we could just move it.
Just switch, maybe.
Okay. Great. Anything else on August 6th? Okay. And we can do the vote on these as a whole package, right? Okay. All right. So let's move on to August 14th. Any corrections, comments on these?
Mm-mm.
Last chance? Okay. I did not have any either. Okay, September 22nd. I thought I had one. I just had one small typo. Progress on various things had less meanings. It should be meaning. That was my only correction. Anyone else? Okay, great. All right, the 27th, October 27th. Yeah, Margaret, go ahead. You're muted, Margaret.
I'm sorry.
That's fine. You do a good job of muting yourself. It's just the unmuting part.
Well, then I forget to mute myself again. On the third page of that, at that first section at the top, third line, Ms. Stanser said there was a study done for hold harmless and groups advocating for getting rid of this. I think it was for not getting rid of this.
Oh, yes. Good.
Yeah.
Yep.
And then I just had a question about some text in that next paragraph.
Okay. Which text specifically?
The last sentence, I guess. We have 72 students who live in Pelham and 40 are school choice.
I think it should be and 40 who are school choice. Do those numbers
Okay.
sound right? If it would be.
Yeah, that's better. 72 from Pelham and 40 who are school choice.
Yep. Okay. So adding the who. Okay.
Okay. Thank you.
Yep. I had, so in 5A, the second sentence of that first paragraph, based on that meeting, I believe that sentence should read, we are in a place of concern for how many funds we are using. Because that's when we were talking about the dwindling school choice revolving fund. So I'd like to just delete that not. And then in B, in the health metrics, I just wanted to clarify, because we had brought that up, and it says, but we have been granted negotiation authority from the region for discussion. I think we are allowed to discuss it, but we have no negotiation authority. So I just want to clarify that in a minute. That was all I had on that. Any other comments or questions on the 27th of October? Okay. And then the last up is December 3rd. I had nothing on this one. Anyone have? Yep, Margaret?
I'm sorry.
Don't apologize. No, you just muted yourself.
I'm unmuted. Just there were 3 typos is all.
Yep.
On number 5, second paragraph, Mr. Nanino asked about the 9 new students, not net.
Yep.
And under budget update, second paragraph, first line, our spending to date, not our sending to date.
Yep.
And in the very last line, I just think aid is in there one time too many. We get federal aid, rural aid. It should just be we get federal rural aid, I think.
Yes. Okay.
That's it.
That sounds good. All right. Anything else? All right. I will take a motion to approve these minutes. Or actually, no, I'll just make the motion. Okay. I move that we approve the minutes of August 6th, August 14th, September 22nd, October 27th, and December 3rd, 2020 as amended. Is there a second?
Second.
Oh, by the whole gang. Okay, I'm going to go with Brenda on this one. Okay, moved by Hall, seconded by Barlow, and we'll do a roll call vote. Ron.
Yes. Yay.
All of it. Okay. Sarah Beth.
Kenny, aye.
Margaret.
Stancer, aye.
Brenda.
Barlow, aye.
And Hall, aye. Okay. We did it. We approved the minutes. Good job. All right, next up is public comment. We did have one. Mike is just going to pull it up so we can scroll through. Okay, thank you. All right, that was it for public comment. Next up, superintendent updates.
I'll be very brief. Just want to share that I was really enjoyed. Kindergarten had an art show, an outdoor art show last month, I think. I'm looking at Miss Lee, but and it was fabulous just seeing families and kids walking through how the art was displayed out on the playground. Just a really creative way to do things. It was cold, and there was still happy kids and happy families. I want to thank Sage and Will for putting that on, because I know it was greatly appreciated by folks in our community. But Lee, I know, has a more extensive list of updates that she's going to give. So if it's okay, I'll pass it on to Lee.
All right, great. You're up, Lee.
Okay, well, I'll try and be brief as well. So I'll go through the students, staff, and families with my usual frame. So starting with students, we've been experimenting with holding some in-person recess meetups that are totally optional during the midday break time. Did the first round of those in January. We're on the second round of them now in February, and they're going great. We've got anywhere from, about a third to half of classes coming, with the exception of 5th grade. Sarah Beth, don't worry, we're going to try again, where we had a shockingly low turnout, but we're going to keep at it. But, as long as the weather holds, I'm happy to continue holding those. It's really nice, I think, for the kids and for the adults to get a little bit of socially distanced time out on the playground. And I'm also continuing virtual snack time with me, so students have the option of, having a little bit of social unstructured time with me there, either online or on the playground. Let's see, our February all-school read is a beautiful book. It's called The Undefeated. It's a poem by Kwame Alexander, and it lines up with our celebrations of Black History Month and our learning about all different elements of Black history. So our staff have been continuing our focus on emotional well-being through a few different projects and initiatives this month. So we started some small social emotional skills groups in early February based on some of the data that we collected earlier in the winter. And we're also doing some work as a staff to look at just some school-wide trends. So yesterday we had a staff meeting and we looked at some attendance data that we've collected, looking at what we're noticing in the morning versus the afternoon versus specials, kind of parsed out by grade level to look a little bit deeper at how our students are engaging with our current learning model. And if there are any barriers that we can lower for students to be engaging more fully with each other and with their teachers. So sort of connected to that work, we started to do some relationship mapping using a tool from DESE, where we really look at every student in the building and identify the different adults that they've fostered relationships with the goal of making sure every student has a trusted adult in the building, whether it's a classroom teacher, a specialist, a paraprofessional, an administrator. And then identifying any opportunities where we can be building more connections with students. And then we also did some celebrations of learning about learning that we're doing about Black History Month and during Black History Month. So as a staff, we made a jam board together, which we do with our students all the time, but it was really fun as a staff to kind of pull some images together and to do some collaborative sharing. And I just want to do a huge thank you to all of the readers from our community who participated in the African American read-in yesterday. We had lots of folks, both from Amherst and Pelham, parents, community members, friends of the school, drop in and read stories with kids. And I think it was one of the highest turnouts that we've had in the past few years. And I think being able to do it online was great. And I'd love to continue having that option moving forward. If folks can't come to the school in future years, it would be great to have them connect virtually, just to have as many readers as we can. So it was a really fun event. Thank you to everyone who was a reader. And speaking of reading, if in case anyone needs a book for over the February break, we're going to be meeting on the Monday after we get back from break, Monday the 22nd, to talk about Bettina Love's book, We Want to Do More Than Survive. It's about abolitionist teaching and celebrating Black culture and Black joy. And it's going to be a great discussion, so all are welcome. And I finally want to thank the PTO who are meeting right now for supporting our Black History Month celebrations. They were able to identify a program that looks really amazing about storytelling and song and Black culture that our students are going to be able to engage with when we get back from the break at the end of the month. So we're just moving right along, busy as always, but it's been a great couple weeks. And I think everybody's ready for a vacation week.
Great. Thank you so much, Lee. Any questions for Lee? All right. Terrific. Okay. So, Mike, do you want to let folks back in and then?
Just going to do. And so maybe I'll queue it up for Tim, who will queue it up for Mira.
Great.
I'll just say briefly for people who weren't on the committee a couple years ago that the curriculum we're talking about was approved a couple years, 2 years ago. I think that's right. By the Pelham School Committee. And so this doesn't require the same kind of vote, or it's not the same process as when we're adopting curriculum. The curriculum this is about expanding it to 3rd and 4th grade. So you might remember very comprehensive, detailed slide decks and lots of work that happened a couple years ago. And you're not going to see that tonight because there's no vote needed. But we did feel like it was important for the school committee to see an update. It's a really nice, brief slide deck that I think captures some of the key parts of the curriculum at grades 3 and 4. And then be able to ask any questions of Tim or Mira. We thought that was important, but I wanted to just cut the distinction between a couple years ago and where we are today. This is really a relatively brief agenda item, especially in comparison to last go around. And I really want to thank Mira and Alin, who's in the green room here, for their continued work on this. It's such a benefit to Pelham School to have folks in our community who are working collaboratively with our staff on incredibly important topics. Mira, if you want me to bring up slides when you're up, I'm happy for you to do it. But if it's easier just to be able to speak to them, I have 2 screens here, so it doesn't affect me too much. So whatever is easier for you, Mira, is fine with me. But I'll turn it over to Tim. Oh, Mira, I'm sorry, I didn't hear your response.
That would be great, Mike.
Yeah, absolutely. So I'll turn it over to Tim, although I may have stolen some of his thunder. I apologize if I did that, Tim. But Tim is our curriculum coordinator for those in the public who don't know Tim. But you can take it away, Tim.
All right. Thanks, Mike. And thank you, everyone, for having us here tonight. Frankly, it's always a pleasure when I get to come to the Pelham School Committee. It always feels like a nice conversation, and which is also true whenever I get to work with Pelham School. And so Mike gave you the background. Some of you were on the school committee when the K-2 curriculum was approved, so you're very familiar with it. Others were involved in the school community, even if you weren't on the committee. This has been something that both the staff and families have been very enthusiastic about at the K-2 level. And Mira Weil and her cohort have been able to write lessons for grades 3 and 4. And so that's what you'll hear about tonight. You'll also hear that there's been a name change. It was known as the SKEE curriculum, SGEE, and I'll let Mira explain the name change and the process too. So without further ado, I'll introduce Mira Weil, and she can give you her background as well.
Thank you so much, Tim, and thank you all for having me here tonight. My name is Mira Weil. I am a doctoral student at UMass in the Health Promotion and Policy Department. And as Mike was saying, I have had the great pleasure to be working with you all, the Pelham community, for coming on 4 years now. So you may have remembered this curriculum as SKI, the Sexuality and Gender Education and Empowerment Curriculum. But we decided that that didn't fully encompass what this curriculum was about. So we decided to change the name to Let's Talk. And it's such an acronym. Let's stands for Liberatory Education Tools, and Talk stands for Teach, Affirm, Learn, and Know. And we changed the name because we felt it was more representative of what this curriculum's actually about, and also a bit more welcoming, because some people feel nervous when they hear the word sexuality. So it's now called Let's Talk, and I'm going to keep this very brief. I was told max 10 minutes, so I'm going to be succinct, and I'm going on the assumption that all of you have had the opportunity to review the lessons for grades 3 and 4 that were shared with you last week. Hopefully that's true. Okay, next slide, please. So I wanted to start with a little bit of the pedagogy, which I think is especially relevant right now in the midst of the social climate that we're in. So we bring a liberatory framework to all of our curriculum development. And what that means is that we hold an anti-racist perspective. The lessons are queer and trans affirming and body positive. What that looks like is that the resources and activities in this curriculum reflect diverse peoples. There's different skin colors and cultures, and we incorporate messaging that offers a liberatory framework by introducing classroom practices and communication strategies that promote anti-racism, body positivity, and help to shine a light on what are often unconscious assumptions and biases. So in this way, the Let's Talk curriculum is a really great accompaniment to other lessons and classroom practices that focus on anti-racism. Next slide, please. This curriculum was developed to be transformative. It was not designed to just be picked up and taught without first looking at ourselves, the adults involved in either facilitating this curriculum or who have children who are going to be part of it. So the content really encourages us as teachers, facilitators, parents, and caregivers to engage deeply in our own self-reflection around sexuality and pleasure, consent, gender roles, whiteness, racism, and to grow and evolve ourselves toward more justice, openness, equity, love, and kindness, and to share that evolution with our children. So it's about personal and social transformation. Next slide, please. The curriculum emphasizes using inclusive language, which for most of us requires relearning or rewiring long-held habits. For example, we learn that instead of saying boys and girls, we say students or everybody, instead of dividing the class by sex or gender, which inherently makes students who are non-binary, trans, or unsure and questioning invisible, to use other attributes like shirt color or age or first letter of first names. And this is important, again, because in order to have all students really feel welcome and seen in the classroom, we need to use language that includes them. So that's a little bit about the pedagogy. Next slide, please. So lessons for grades 3 and 4 follow the same structure as lessons for grades K through 2. They all have a stated objective. They start with recommended readings and videos. Then there's exercises and warm-ups that are either embodiment or arts-based, or sometimes both. There's a vocabulary section. There's 1 or 2 developmentally appropriate activities. And then there's a closing reflection activity that helps integrate information that was shared during the lesson. Also, each lesson has an associated take-home letter for families that outlines the objective, discusses the activities, provides the vocabulary definitions and the readings, so that families can really stay connected with what their child or children are learning in this curriculum. Okay, next slide, please. So I'm just going to go quickly through the titles of the lessons. The new lessons are going to be in bold. And again, all of these lessons are updated so that the content, the readings, the videos, the activities are developmentally appropriate. So they're not the same as the kindergarten through grade 2, but there's a similar objective for the lessons that are not in bold. So there's 5 new lessons. There's an introduction to the unit, learning about bodies, getting to know me, gender, listening and intuition, consent and boundaries. Next slide, please. Now we get into some of the new ones, self-love and appreciation. What is family? Friendships and feelings, puberty, cycles and periods, how babies are made. Next slide, please. Sexuality, me and the media, and yay, I'm unique. So then just to summarize the 5 new lessons, next slide, please, are self-love and appreciation, what is family, puberty, cycles and periods, which is for grade 4, although the grade 3 teacher can decide to offer that lesson if it feels developmentally appropriate for the students that year, and me and the media. And that's it.
All right, can we take, oh, there we go. All right, thank you so much, Mira. All right, do folks have questions for Mira, for Tim? Yeah, Ron, go ahead.
I assume that just like the old program, there will be teacher training for these units?
Yes, and we actually already conducted 6 hours of professional development for the kindergarten through 5th grade teachers a couple of weeks ago on these new lessons.
And when is it scheduled to be put into the classroom?
That is a question for Lee, I believe.
So all of the lessons are really slated to be taught in the spring and toward the end of the year. So what has worked for K through 2 is to really spend the first part of the year establishing a class community where the class can have really open, honest dialogue, and then dive into some of these conversations in a collaborative way, starting usually in April. So that way they have enough space to really take time for all of the lessons, and they've established the trusting community in order to make them meaningful. I would not recommend that students and teachers jump into this on September 1st. So I think it's worked so far for students to do these lessons in the spring, and that's what the 3rd and 4th grade teachers are thinking as they're planning for the next few months of instruction too.
Thank you.
Sure.
Question for you, Mira. Can you, I know you did some evaluation and surveys as part of the first rollout for K through 2. Can you just talk a little bit about what you learned as part of that? I mean, I'm sure it was a ton, so this doesn't have to be a really long answer, but just what you learned and how that informs how you're doing the 3 to 4 expansion.
Yeah, no, that's a great question. So we learned a lot of specifics from the teachers that really guided our revisions. We did a pretty extensive revision of the K through 2 lessons over the past summer and the previous spring. So a lot of the evaluation, the classroom observation that we were able to do before, COVID stopped in-person instruction, and then the interviews with the teachers really guided revisions and encouraged us to keep developing the curriculum, because we were hearing from the K through 2 teachers how successful it was. And after the 2nd year of implementation, how much they noticed the change in the students and the increased comfort level with the content after just 1 year of prior instruction. And then I was able to do interviews with some of the older grade teachers who were expressing a real need and wish for some support around the content that was just like naturally arising in their classrooms. So I would say that, and then the interviews that I was able to do with parents and caregivers, I mean, they were just overwhelmingly positive. I was hearing so much appreciation for this curriculum, and some of the ways that people were noticing changes in the school sort of culture, and how the parents on the playground and just in social conversations, that there was a lot more ease of discussion and a lot more discussion period around things like consent and sexuality, and that it was feeling really good. So I know that's very brief, Sarah. I don't know if that answers it.
Yeah, no, that it really does. Yeah, I mean, the only negative thing I heard was from my own third grader who missed grade 3 and was kind of like, what's going on? Like, what's happening here? Yeah. So yeah, that was the only negative feedback, is like, TikTok, we need more of these. Well, and so actually the second part of what you said, I guess, leads into a question that I have for you, Lee, about, is this like, as you know about the K through 2, and then it's starting in 3 and 4, is that it seems like a lot of this stuff, there's a lot of room to kind of incorporate what's being learned into a lot of other areas of the curriculum. Are teachers talking about that? And is that something that's encouraged?
Absolutely. I think the framework to really understand, or the framework that the lessons provide to really understand your identity and how that shapes how you see the world, has so many applications. And I really appreciate that there's, pieces about media literacy woven into the curriculum, and anti-racism and intersectionality of identity. And those are conversations that we're having not just in social studies, but every time you sit down to read a piece of literature and you talk about the identity of the person who wrote it and how that shapes the narratives that they write. There's so many parallels that you can make across the curriculum. And I think this kind of learning at a really foundational time sets students up to be aware of potential biases or lenses that they have as they move through the world. So I think generally it's part of the foundational skill building, while students are also learning the foundational literacy and math skills. They're also learning foundational skills about how to build interpersonal intelligence and social awareness with the world around them too. So in that way, I do think it has very broad applications.
Great. Okay. Other questions? Anything else? Yeah, Brenda.
Oh, I guess 2 things. First of all, thank you, Mira, for this. I think it's so fantastic. I have 2 children, one in 2nd grade who has participated in a couple of years, and then I have a 5th grader who has not. And it's really interesting to navigate conversations in the household when you have one son who's very comfortable with some of these concepts that have been reinforced, and the other who hasn't benefited from those education. So I do hope that you're able to continue, and I know the original plan was to continue to develop something more comprehensive, maybe to 6th grade or beyond. So just a thank you. And then I guess a question for Lee. I'm just curious, because the new topic of puberty was brought up, and certainly that's something that all kids need to learn about. And I'm just curious about what is happening for 5th and 6th grade around some of those issues.
So that was something that came up in the training that we did in January, in talking with the 5th grade teacher and really craving some materials that align with what students are learning about in kindergarten through 2nd grade, and then hopefully 3rd and 4th grade too, and really continuing those on. So I know that the intention is to extend the curriculum all the way up through 6th grade. And so right now, the resources that we have to teach about puberty in 5th and 6th grade are the same ones that the teachers have utilized in the past. And so while they align with what their the teachers' counterparts in Amherst are using, they don't necessarily vertically align with what students are learning at Pelham. And so the hope is to kind of calibrate in both directions so that we can bring some vertical alignment and create a continuous set of vocabulary and language. And then hopefully do some partnership with peers in Amherst, so that students are getting some of the same exposure and experiences too. And I know that's part of a longer term hope for the work. Does that answer your question, Barb? And Tim may be able to speak to it a little bit more than me too.
Thank you.
Yeah. Tim, do you mind jumping in just with a brief little bit about some similar or related work anyway? Maybe it's a better way to put it, talking about at the upper grades in one of our schools in Amherst.
Sure. It's no surprise to anyone. I mean, this has been a topic that has come up, and the curriculum that Lee referenced, that's the one that's been used by teachers for a number of years, is the same as what the Amherst schools have. And it's, I mean, interestingly, in the world of curriculum, it's not necessarily that old, but in the world of the way people's views and understandings of these topics have evolved, it feels very old at this point. And just sort of as a side note, we're sort of working ahead of the curve in that the state has not updated its curriculum frameworks on health, I think, since 1999. So, which might as well be like a millennia ago at this point. So at one of the Amherst schools at Crocker Farm, a couple of years ago, sort of as this was going on at Pelham, this concern came up around the curriculum that 5th and 6th graders got, which was puberty and sexuality in more the traditional sense that most of you would be familiar with. And that largely grew out of a concern for students who are non-binary, who are questioning their gender, and how that curriculum didn't leave room for those students. And so some of the staff at Crocker Farm, and I joined them for some of it, and some parents who had some expertise, worked on some lessons to replace what had been in use there. And in fact, we went a little further there, and that we expanded down into 4th grade. And so we ended up with a nice progression in a similar vein to what Pelham has done. And it was very funny in that Pelham was starting at the lowest end at K1-2. Crocker Farm was starting at the upper end. And I tried to sort of be a conduit to share some information in between. And so where that will put us in terms of Amherst and that adjustment, it remains to be seen. I think one thing that is very appealing about the work that has been done in Pelham is that it is a very clear progression. And kids are starting out learning the vocabulary, the language, how to interact with each other through these lessons in a way that it isn't something brand new at 4th grade. And so it's something I would like to entertain with the principals in Amherst and the Amherst School Committee at some point down the road.
Great, thank you, Tim.
Mm-hmm.
Other questions, anything else for Tim or Mira? Yeah, Sarah Bess.
Not so much a question as much just a comment that I just want to say thank you. I think it is fantastic that Pelham starts this so early and so young, and I think it gives great power to children that carries with them, that will carry with them through the rest of their lives. And I was excited when it was starting in the little grades, and I was really sad that both my kids were going to miss it. And I'm really happy that it is expanding, and I hope it continues to expand, because having a 5th grader also, and an older daughter, I really think everybody benefits here. So thank you so much for creating this program and having Pelham be the place where it gets to start. I think it's fantastic.
Yes, absolutely. All right. Anything else? Okay. Yeah, I mean, I guess I'll just close by echoing Sarah Bess's comments. I've never been on a school committee anywhere else, but this does feel really unique to have community members come forward with a proposal to work in collaboration with the curriculum director at the district, to implement this, to then work so closely with teachers on training and making changes, and then the evaluation and the expansion. I mean, it just seems like you really started from scratch to create, that there wasn't, I remember that was part of when we initially talked about the first round. It's like, there's nothing to start from that really works. And so I guess for the Let's Talk team to put all of this effort into our tiny little school, and for us, for parents like me to see the impact that it has in their own children and how it's changing school culture. I mean, that just, especially nowadays when there's so much bad news, it feels so great to be able to get an update like this, to know it's expanding, it's working, teachers love it, kids love it, and like, you're helping make them into good and whole little humans, and that's really great. So thanks for all of the work, and feels really good to hear about this. So thank you.
Thanks so much. It's such a deep source of joy for me.
Good. Very good. All right. We do need to move on to other agenda items though. But thank you so much for coming, Mira and Tim, and Alin in the green room.
Thank you.
Okay. Do you want to let Doug, you want to let Doug in and, okay. Hi, Doug. All right. Next up, FY21 second quarter budget.
Yep, and so we'll turn that over to Doug. He's got a number of items tonight, and very smooth, I should say, by the chair, being like, we have so much bad news, and then that's like the segue to Doug coming in talking about budget. So I did know.
I know. Yeah. Hey, no pressure, Doug.
But we'll start with the FY21, and then we'll gradually transition to thinking about things for the next fiscal year as well. But I'll turn it over to you, Dr. Slaughter.
Okay, so I'll attempt to pull up the correct item for you guys to view. And so hopefully this will display in just a moment. And so hopefully, can you all see that? Should I zoom in a little bit, or is that visible to everyone? I can zoom in a bit.
It looks okay to me. I don't know if others have smaller screens, but
I would zoom in a bit, Doug. I'm on the YouTube. Yeah, that's probably one more dose of that.
How's that?
That's good. I'm looking at the YouTube screen as well for the viewers. And that looks pretty viewable on the YouTube screen. So,
okay.
Right, the people can't see you, but they know you're talking. So
that's all right. So I'll just take you through the quarter two status of the budget for the current fiscal year. In general, things are progressing as expected. We have some unknowns in our budget this year, as you well know and expect. But we've had a budget freeze in place for a while now, and that's going to help us out as far as getting from beginning to end and still trying to stay on budget. However, there's a few things to keep an eye on. So I'll start first and talk about payroll. At this point in the year, the percentage of our budget we would typically use under payroll would be about 50%. And we're a little under that, which is expected. We've been sort of managing our costs in that regard, and so we're right on track with regard to our regular payroll. Obviously, our substitutes and overtime are well down and below what we normally would have at this point. A lot less, there's just not the opportunity for absenteeism, much less the incidence of it. So those savings are going to help us out considerably as we go through the year. But the short story on our payroll lines is that they're tracking as we expect them to. As we look at our expense lines, you'll notice that there are two areas that were highlighted at quarter one and are highlighted again here that are not necessarily in a tremendous amount of trouble at the moment. But as we look at potential expenses as we go through the rest of the year, they could prove problematic, and so we want to keep a very close eye on those. And that's in our special education area, and as well as in our facility management. And what those really reflect is the operating within the pandemic. There are a number of costs we've had to take on. There is a fair amount of federal support to help us out with that, but it may or may not materialize fully, and so we're keeping a close eye on those two areas of the budget. The other areas are tracking pretty much as would be expected. They're at 50% or a little bit lower than that. Obviously, those areas that are tracking below are in good shape and will be able to help us out as we go through the rest of the year. An area like administrative services, which looks at 73% spending at the mid-year point, looks a bit concerning, but actually it's not. That includes several things that we purchased at the beginning of the year and pay for at the beginning of the year, like software licenses and the type, and types of things like that. So those are actually still on budget, not problematic in that regard. The other thing I'll mention is that, as I said before, there's a number of things that are COVID-related spending that we've done. The process by which we're using federal monies, a couple of them are direct grants, and some of them are reimbursement processes. And so we file through FEMA, through the town, and the CARES Act to get reimbursement for things. And so it's a little bit of a slow process for one thing. So our true picture will hopefully become more clear as we go through and finish up the third quarter and begin the fourth quarter. But also with reimbursement process, there are things that are presumed to be eligible, but once the folks at FEMA take a look, they may deem them ineligible. And so as a result, there are things that we will ultimately have to carry within our own operating budget. And so that's why, again, like I said, we've highlighted those in red just so that we're aware that there may be a significant amount of cost that we're going to have to contend with by the end of the year. Nonetheless, I think at this point, given the information we know at this time, how the reimbursements have gone to date, what funds are available to us, I think we're still okay, and we'll know a lot more when we take a closer look at third quarter. But I don't have any I'm certainly concerned. I want to keep a very close eye on it, but I don't have any outsized worry relative to our budget for this year so far. So I think I'll pause there and see if there are any particular questions that anyone has. And I think since I can't see anyone, so just speak up if you have a question relative to the quarter two numbers and presentation.
Okay. Any questions for Doug on Q2? No? Okay. All right. Thank you.
So I wonder if I should just keep rolling, or if the superintendent would like to talk about or introduce the budget conversation. I believe that's next on the agenda.
Yep. Yeah, go ahead, Mike.
Yep. So first, I just want to note it's a budget hearing, but we did not receive any public comments or comments for the hearing on the budget. So just want to note that. For people who are on the committee, just as a reminder, budget hearing allows for what's pretty typical for you all, which is some give and take and time for Dr. Slaughter to present, as well as ask questions. And, the idea is that we would take that feedback, and if there's any adjustments to be made, we'd have time to make them before the March meeting, which is when the budget would get voted by the Pelham School Committee. So we sort of did some introductory meetings, set the stage for budget. Tonight's the hearing, and March would be the vote. I think it's worth mentioning, in addition, Dr. Slaughter, Lee, and myself, Doug Lee and myself, had a third of our optional budget meetings with staff series. We'd love not to have these meetings with staff, but the situation sort of called for it. So we did meet with staff on Tuesday. We shared orally what's in this presentation because we thought it was really important for staff to hear that before a public dialogue occurred on that, and had some good dialogue. And Lee had some private conversations with staff members who would be directly affected by some of the reductions in the budget. So I think it's just important context of where we're situated and how we're communicating this information. The short story, and Doug will do the longer one, is that there's no surprises here. We've been talking for the last couple of months about the challenges in the Pelham budget. The saving grace continues to be that we do have a steady stream of income coming in for the rental of the gym. And we also don't have any charter schools students that we know of, right? And that report in December indicated that was still zero. And we still have a pretty decent operating budget problem, and having 40 choice students is just simply not sustainable. And we shared this with staff on Tuesday. It's no one's fault. It's a situation that we find ourselves in. but it's a significant situation that we find ourselves in. And Doug will talk about this year's budget cuts, which are painful. And, again, going from more pleasant news to less pleasant news in this agenda item. But I think what I shared with staff is something's got to give here long term, that either we need to increase the number of school choice students or the school is not sustainable. So, we do have a roughly $50,000 deficit that we're looking at for next year. That's a huge number for Pelham Public School, for a very small and wonderful school. And we were forced to make reductions we would not want to make. But there's not, a couple of you have been on this a while. If there was any fat to trim, which I don't think there really ever was in Pelham, but if there was any, it's long gone. So we're really cutting, unfortunately, people who work directly with students, because there's nowhere else to go on the budget. So I just want to do that framing. I know Dr. Slaughter will go through the details, and then we can open up for dialogue and discussion. But I did want to give both the process update and the gestalt of where we're headed. And then Doug can go through, again, a number of the how we got here in much more detail. So with that, I'll turn it over to you, Doug, if that's okay.
Great, thank you. Is currently my screen shared? Is that correct, or is it not?
No, not right
I will
now.
reshare it. Yep, I'm in control of that one too, I think. There we go.
Okay.
Sorry about that, Doug.
And again, I'll make this a little bit larger. It's a lot of numbers, and I don't expect people to necessarily track them specifically and identify exactly, the changes and that sort of thing. What I'm showing here on page 1 is part of our payroll changes from one year to the next, and the sort of different areas of the budget in which we're staffing our school. As I move to the second page, we sort of continue to finish through that. And what I really would point out on this is sort of this area down here at the bottom of the second page, which is talking about sort of the totality of the change in our budget relative to staffing and what those costs are. And a large share of our budget is driven by the people that do the work, and it's a people business. And so it's not surprising to see the size of increase that we see there from our staffing. And this doesn't capture all of the staffing expense. It captures, sort of some of the raw payroll expense, but there are some other aspects around benefits and some other components of staffing costs that are not here, but will show up as we proceed through. But in general, you see that year-over-year change is going to be driven largely by our payroll changes in our staff. As I go to the next page here, and feel free to sort of shout out and stop me if you need me to slow down and talk about something in specifics that you see. As we get into the expenses, by and large, we've held everything as flat as possible. What we're seeing here in this area right here is the fact that we had the news that the superintendent spoke about not having any charter students. So we've taken out that expense for fiscal 22, and we also have fewer choice students out of our district, and so that's also reflected here. So that helped our budget by almost $30,000, just a little bit less. The increase in information systems is a shift in putting some what were formerly capital items into the budget, and I'll speak to that a little bit when we get to capital. But essentially, that's a cart's worth of Chromebooks that we're needing to purchase. I spoke with the finance committee chair, and he's aware of that increase and planning on having that sort of jump in the base level budget for the school. So that would be in addition to sort of the normal expected amount of increase in tax revenues that would be used. So he's prepared for that number to show up and be there, and so that won't come as a surprise. And then I'll shift here to the last page of the sort of budget, and you see the remainder of the expenses. Utilities are going to go up. There are some that are going up more than others. We have the water and sewer is definitely going up in a more significant way than it has in recent years. Our health insurance costs are presuming to be a very modest increase. We have a firmer number than when we last spoke on this. We have an actual increase of 1.11% in fiscal 22. So that's been factored in. So it has a very modest impact on the totality of the budget as far as the health insurance is concerned. Excuse me. Other retirement benefits, et cetera, that we're tracking, we've taken into account here as well. And of course, under that control accounts, that's where we put the things we don't know as much about at this time, but we know we need to put some placeholders in. It carries some information about some contingency planning in a variety of ways, and so we have some resources applied to that. But what you see at the very bottom here is that the net increase over the course of the current fiscal year to next fiscal year nets out to be about $46,000 worth of increase. And in a typical year, that would be a modest and appropriate amount of increase that could be handled fairly well by the Pelham increases in property tax and that sort of thing. What's not shown on here and was demonstrated when we last spoke on the topic is what's happened on the revenue side of things. While Chapter 70 has gone up a little bit, and that helps us out. The new projections have come out with the governor's budget, which came out on the 27th of January. Our need to reduce our use of school choice funding is a pretty significant negative impact on our ability to move ahead and sustain the school in exactly the same way we have it now and continue the level services. And so as a result of those losses in ability to support the budget with school choice revenues, also a small downturn in Medicaid. We perform services that are eligible for Medicaid reimbursement. Those have dropped by being remote over the last year or so, and so that impacts our ability to fund our school as well. And so both of those in combination have created essentially this roughly $50,000 of shortfall of revenues against expenses, and knowing what the town, in saying that is an understanding of what the town can afford relative to its tax base in the coming year. And so on this last slide, we've articulated the sort of specifics of what's going to need to happen relative to our staffing in order to sort of make our budget work for fiscal 22. And I think what I'll do at this point is I'll stop and perhaps let the superintendent or Principal Whiting-Jones speak to these particulars a little bit more and the process that we came to identify these areas of reduction.
Yeah, I can do that. So there's 3 cuts, budget reductions that are listed, and they're all painful. They're all not things we would do otherwise. So I'll start from the bottom of this list. So we currently have 2 days a week of music, which is 0.4 FTE, and this reduction would shift that so it would be 1 day of music, which would be 0.2 left. And this is a really difficult cut. We have outstanding staff at Pelham School, which makes it that much harder. We did need to hit a cut number. And because we have instrumental music as well as classroom music, we do feel like compared to some of our neighboring schools, both in Amherst and other small rural schools, that this was an area that we could align, but this is not something we would do. If our budget got $14,000 better, we'd be having a different conversation, just to put it very bluntly. Similarly with the other cuts, the library paraeducators, there are 2 part-time paraeducators who work with the school and the town, and similar to the music staff, we tried to see what could we maintain that we could. So maintaining one of the part-time library paraeducators allows for still access for Pelham students to the library, but it will reduce the programming that's possible because of the reduction in staffing. And finally, it's sort of a hard one to describe, regular ed or special ed, but we looked at our student caseload and our special ed caseload, and this will stretch our paraeducator and professional staff quite thin next year, but we feel like we can meet the IEP grid times without having an additional paraeducator in the building. So that's how we got to $46,000 of cuts, a 1.47 FTE reduction at the school. And these are not easy. They will have an impact on our students and staff and community. But we do need to, we're trying to do what we need to do to meet the benchmark that the town has set. And we know the town is worked with us successfully in the past in a couple of very difficult situations. And we understand that right now the school is not sustainable financially. And, we'd love to make it sustainable on the revenue side by bringing in more choice, as that hasn't been possible this year for a whole host of reasons. To increase our choice numbers, this is the other side of how to make it sustainable. So these reductions are unfortunate, and I think I can speak a little bit more to the choice piece a little later in the agenda, where you have a different topic talking about next year and how we could maybe start that recruitment process for next year, perhaps sooner. But these are the budget reductions that we are forced to make, and this is what we're proposing to you this evening. And for the regional members, I want to apologize because you've had 2 out of the last 3 nights looking at pretty significant budget reductions in 2 of the districts you work for. So I just want to make a particular note for Margaret and Sarah Best that it's been a long week for you both looking at these types of things at the K-12 level from Pelham all the way up to the region. So I apologize. I wish we were having different conversations, but this is where we are.
Okay. Thank you, Doug and Mike. All right. So I guess let's start. Any questions on, numbers, any clarification needed? Yeah, let's go Sarah Best and then Ron.
I just have a quick question about the Medicaid reimbursement. So because we're in remote now, we're obviously not providing those services that can then be reimbursed. When we do go back to in person, I assume the school is still responsible for providing said resources, whatever they are, and then will that reimbursement money come back? Is that, I'm sure it's the state, I'm sure it's delayed some very unfortunate amount of time.
Right.
But so I guess that's my question, right? So we go back to school and we're in person and those services resume, therefore that reimbursement resumes?
That's correct. And
Okay.
we have some services we're still providing. It's just not quite as many as we were.
Yeah. I wasn't saying that they were all gone and never to be seen again. I just was asking, I know there are some things you just can't do when you're in remote. So
right. That's right. And I think that once we return to in-person, school, it'll be a lot easier to, get back to the level of service that we traditionally had. And there is a significant, just to answer the other part of your question, there is a pretty significant lag in, when the services are offered, when we submit the paperwork, when we get paid. So we try to, keep that in mind when doing our budgeting as well. Traditionally about 10,500 is the number. And we're estimating about 5,500 as the expected revenue there. It's a much bigger set of numbers, obviously, in the region, as you saw the other night, but just for the other members of the committee, and I haven't had those up in front of you in a while, so I just would mention that.
thank you. Oh, I had one more question, if that's all right, if I can keep going. So I think I also saw on there the transportation. So that, hold on, I have to look at my other screen so I can see it with, sorry. Where did you go, transportation? Okay, so on the last page, nope, never mind. I think I confused things. We're all good. Moving on. Thank you.
All right, Ron, go ahead.
We're going to discuss school choice in greater detail later this evening.
Well, yeah, go ahead, Mike.
We can definitely talk about it now. I was going to mention it, but this is certainly part and parcel of the situation we're in. So, you should feel, in my opinion, really enabled to talk about it.
I'm not sure this is correct, but last year when I was talking to people in the building, they seemed to suggest that a great deal of the diversity in Pelham School came from school choice students. I don't know if that's correct, but are we going to experience a decrease in diversity as we lose our school choice base?
I can respond to that. So I think the school has more racial and ethnic diversity than the town in general. Some of that is based on the age factor. It's not an uncommon phenomenon in Massachusetts, where the other district I work in also has the same phenomena, where if you look at the racial demographics of the town versus the students in the school, you'll see a distinction. But I think you're right to note that there are significant amount of school choice students who do contribute to the greater diversity of our student body. So I think, this is a financial picture, and we're worried about school choice financially, but I think you raise a lot of other non-financial impacts that having a reduced number of school choice students have. And I think I appreciate you doing that, Ron. It's a really important point to come back to.
Yeah, go ahead. Mm-hmm. Yeah, go ahead, Ron. Mm-hmm.
And then when will we know? Let's assume COVID disappears and people want to join the Pelham School from around the region again. When does that take place? When does school choice election take place by families?
So school choice will be something that this committee considers probably at their next meeting. There'll be a school choice hearing, perhaps even a vote at the next meeting. And I think when we talk about the fall semester, which is on the agenda tonight, I think we should have a bit of a conversation about how the Pelham School Committee feels about that. And I think that might influence what we can do in terms of advertising for choice.
Thank you.
Other questions? I have one. I know, I feel like I always bring this up, just I'm sure because of past experience. Just having 0 in charter tuition makes me nervous. Just given what's happened in the past with the process. Should I just get over that?
No. It's something we struggle with. I think if our budget was in less dire straits, then we would have a placeholder there as a security blanket for us. We don't feel like there's another $20,000 to cut this year. I think if we really were to get charter students, we'd have to look at our choice reserve account to cover, and then plan ahead for the next year after. Because that first year, you pretty much get covered from reimbursement. It's really the second year that number hits you. So we do have a little bit of a breathing room in terms of the charter reimbursement. But you're right. I would love to. What we would typically do, and honestly, what's the best practice to do, would be to have a placeholder in there, and then if it doesn't come, then that rolls back into the school choice account. It's hard to figure out where that $20,000 will come from in the current situation.
Right. Yeah, and I'm not. Yes,
I'm not suggesting you were. I'm just explaining the rationale. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. But your second part, and I just want to make sure I'm fully clear. So, to the extent we do get unexpected charter students, it's not like then in the middle of next year there would have to be further staffing cuts to respond to that. That's what it could come out of the revolving fund in an emergency, basically.
Yeah, I think that's what we'd have to do.
Okay. All right.
Yeah, which then contributes to a larger financial picture, but it would not involve like an immediate staff reduction.
Right. Oh, yeah. To be clear, none of it is good. It's just what's less bad.
Well put.
Okay. All right. Any other questions, comments? Okay. Well, thanks for this. That's really hard. I know that like the impact certainly on individual teachers, but also on, kind of the Pelham family and the closeness of the school. I'm sure just makes news like this really, really difficult on everyone. So that really hits home. I think too, just hearing everything that Doug and Mike, the two of you say, I mean, not to minimize this at all, but this and worse is really what we're in for if things continue. Is that a fair statement?
I don't see where the other funding source that's not school choice comes in to help.
Right.
I mean, the Student Opportunity Act is not going to have a significant influence on Pelham. The district doesn't have the demographics where it would affect things. I don't think Chapter 70, even if it was increased $100 per student or something like that, which it's not going to make a big enough difference. It's really the school survives, the structure of the school fiscally survives on having, more choice students. I mean, just to quantify, I said this to staff, I think on Tuesday, if we had 10 more choice students, we'd be making 0 budget cuts. We'd be even, right? So if we had 50, we'd probably be to the good a little bit because of special ed increment and other things. And that's usually where we were at until this year. We were usually at around 50 until last year and this year. And at that level, the school's pretty sustainable. It's not like, that we have this new expenses, but at 40 school choice students, the numbers don't add up. And that's what we're facing this year. And that's really the challenge. And, it's been hard. Lee has done a great job and she's recruited a couple school choice students, but for many elementary families, the reality is in a remote model, we're a unique district right now that's in a remote model at the elementary school. And it's very, very challenging to attract school choice families when we're in remote or there's no guarantee of being back in person. That's not to criticize anyone, the district for the MOA. It's not going to get into any of those things, but there is a practical reality that it makes it very challenging for us right now.
Right. Yeah. And I don't mean to beat a dead horse and make you keep saying that. I just think it's really important that to understand that this is, I think there's just seems to always be a sense that the district and the town always kind of figure it out. And I think we're kind of beyond that now without kind of substantial changes. So, okay. All right. Anything else on FY22? Okay. All right. Okay. Next up, volunteer in-person learn. Oh wait, Sarah. Oh, you lost your chance. Nope, I'm muting you. Go ahead, Sarah Bess.
No, first I just wanted to say, these suck. Not for lack of a better term. These are really, really crummy. Pelham is a fabulous school, and part of what makes us fabulous is our tight-knit community, and the thought of losing some of those people is just really sad. And I also wanted to say thank you to Lee and to Doug and to Mike, because I know these conversations are really crummy. We've had a lot of them lately, and having to have those conversations on the other side where it directly affects students and their families and teachers and the people who we all work with and see all the time, that's crummy. Thank you for doing it, I guess.
Yes, agree. All right. Return to in-person learning update.
I think the next agenda item is FY22 preschool discussion and vote.
Yeah, you know what? You don't think that. You read that. So nice job. Sorry. Yes. Okay. So, so we had talked last month about that and we were kind of putting it off. I mean, I wonder, given other agenda items, if this is something, certainly we can discuss, but if maybe holding off on a vote makes sense. Yeah, go ahead, Mike.
I actually wonder if, just out of respect for Dr. Slaughter, and this is my fault in putting together the agenda, so I own it, if we could do capital and then he could perhaps go on his merry way.
I think that's a great idea. Is that okay with you, Doug? All right. Okay, so put a pin in preschool capital plan.
All right, I'm going to share my screen again. I've got to find the right item to share here. I was all set to take a little mental break.
Sorry, Doug. I figured trying to get out earlier was preferable.
Oh, it absolutely is. I'm just trying to shift gears here a little bit. Sorry. So I believe when we spoke in in December, and hopefully you see this. And this is not terribly an interesting slide, but I put it up just for reference in some ways for myself. In December, we spoke about capital, and I said, well, it's likely this is going to change pretty significantly. We had identified some network switches, some school security upgrades, some computer replacements, and some interior renovations and upgrades that we needed to do in a capital plan. And it, we have subsequently revised this. I've had some dialogue with the chair of the finance committee in Pelham, and partly because of changing circumstances, we don't need the network switches at this point in time. That was contingent upon some work that the town of Amherst is going to do that would positively impact the Pelham school, but that work's going to be delayed a little bit, so that is coming off. But as a result, then the capital plan is changed a little bit. I'm going to switch and show you in a even less clear or less dramatic fashion, sort of where we've landed relative to the capital needs for the coming year. So the school security upgrades are still in there. We have a little bit of a previous capital item that is going to support this project as well. The back door on the building needs its hardware replaced, and there's some other control panel upgrades to the security system of the school that are needing to be addressed, and that's a pretty significant one. It also that door that is needing some work also has handicap access, and so it's a critical entryway for folks who are mobility impaired to get to the building and access that into the building, and so it's an important upgrade in that regard. The interior renovations and upgrades, again, this ask for $4,000 is an augmentation to some existing funding to finish some projects that we have started, and some aspects of them took a little more revenue than we thought, and so hopefully this will get the gymnasium painted. So that's the hope there. And then, as you well know, there was a study done a couple of years ago regarding ADA needs at the school, and in the most recent fiscal year, there was a $10,000 capital item for ADA improvements. We're working on some of those at this point. There's more things on the list, and so we thought we'd ask for another $5,000 in capital money to continue to address ADA issues that were itemized in that list. Unfortunately, I didn't get a chance to connect with the facilities director to get a more specific list of projects that he's thinking about and working on. But I should be getting that certainly to you guys and to the finance committee as well, and in advance of town meetings, so that if people have particular questions about how we're progressing against that report's recommendations, we'll be able to see that. And so it's a fairly modest series of asks this year, but I think some significant things that are going to be addressed by virtue of these capital items. I think I'll stop there and see if you have questions about those.
Okay, can we just stop sharing just so we can see one another? Sorry. There we go. Yeah, Sarah Bess, go ahead.
So I guess my only question is the network switches. That would do great things to improve the internet at Pelham, correct?
Yeah, ultimately. So just to sort of paint the larger picture, the town of Amherst is in process of installing, I guess, what's called what they used to call an iNet. It's a fiber optic high-speed internet loop within the town of Amherst, and they have assets, water and water treatment facilities in Pelham, and so they're going to be running some of that high-speed, fiber optic network up into Pelham, right next to the school. But it's that section, that sort of spur that heads into Pelham is not part of the first phase of their project, and so it's been delayed. It actually has a really strong benefit ultimately to Pelham School, because if the school is able to connect into it, the current cost that we're incurring year over year to cover some of our internet access for the school would be significantly reduced. And so it's kind of a win-win, but it's going to be delayed a little bit until the town of Amherst kind of gets their piece done, and then we might need to invest in those switches at that point and then we'll ultimately sort of realize some of the savings in the year-over-year operating cost of the high-speed internet. So it's coming, but not yet on that.
Okay. Yeah, I was also thinking about, I guess, teacher and student quality of life with the internet there, because I know there are some days where, teachers have to teach from the building and it's really hard. They end up having to keep their screens off because things are too glitchy, and that feels like a really big ask for them to keep doing that. So I just want to make sure that as soon as we can advocate for them that they need quality internet. If it would have been great if it was last year, but these things happen. So just as long as it stays on the,
yeah, I think
keep an eye on it, I guess.
Yeah, the changing nature of school and how we do the things we do in school, whether we're in a remote circumstance or not, definitely are more and more dependent upon high quality and high speed internet. And so
exactly,
bolstering what we have is an essential thing that's going to need to happen. It's an infrastructure step that parallels anything else we do in our infrastructure in the building. So it is definitely a direction we need to go ultimately.
Okay, great. Thank you.
Other capital questions? My recollection, and I could be off on this, I thought part of the thing with the ADA stuff is that we didn't get around to the 10,000 from the warrant last year. And so that's why it was still out. I mean, is the thinking that there's the capacity to complete $15,000 worth of work if, or was that a COVID related thing why it couldn't get done last year?
So the $10,000 was voted by town meeting this last spring, or really was June, so it was almost summer. And so that's money available currently. And so we are, chipping away at some ADA projects this year a little bit. We'll probably get more, I don't say aggressive, but more active in those projects this year. But this will be, added to that for continued work in the coming fiscal year. So they'll work together on it, but it'll be ongoing process.
Okay, great. Yeah, and it would be helpful to have that detail of the anticipated projects whenever it's ready, just because sometimes those questions do come up at town meeting.
Right.
Okay, thanks. Okay. Doug, you, I think, are free to go.
Thank you. Good to see you all. Good night.
Take care. Okay, so going back up to preschool. So we had talked about this last month, having the conversation of when would we be ready to make a decision on whether or not to open it up, knowing what we knew from last year that folks would not pay for remote preschool, and then making the decision we made this year. So that's why we were discussing it kind of, sooner rather than later, so that preschool families who need to make decisions know what they're in for. But then we also have this discussion of next year. So I guess I'll leave it to, other folks if they feel like we would want to talk about this more and vote on something tonight, or hold off for a month with the other things we're working on. Yep, Ron, go ahead.
I think it's been adequately discussed. We know what we need to do. I'd be in favor of voting tonight.
Okay. Yep, Sarah Best.
I am going to have to respectfully disagree. I think we need to make a decision about what our K through 6th grade is going to look like before we can decide whether or not there's going to be a preschool. I love the preschool program. I want it to be there, but if we're not having K through 6 in the building, definitely, then it's hard to have preschool in there.
Well, I think we are agreeing. I thought we're going to get rid of the preschool. Period.
Yeah, that's the discussion, and I think I didn't tee it up that clearly. I think if we're looking in agenda item G to make a motion about what we expect for next year. If we are hoping to plan for full in-person instruction next year, if we can feel confident about that sooner rather than later, maybe there is a possibility for the preschool. I'm not yet advocating one way or the other. I just don't know if there's how much progress we can make, or if, I think it's a challenging balance. We are certainly not going to we will not be able to make a decision with perfect information, because we will never have perfect information.
I thought we discussed the revenues would be inadequate to support the expenses to be incurred in offering a preschool program, and therefore we wanted to eliminate the preschool program for 1 year. This would be the case whether or not there was in-person learning from K through 6. Maybe I'm wrong, but I thought that's what my recollection is.
Oh, okay. I thought it was more about the potential for a remote preschool environment if the school was not open. But
well,
yeah, Mike, go ahead.
Yeah, I think there's a couple of things here. So I think I was thinking about this topic before the meeting quite a bit, because there's the other topic that we have. I don't know if it's right after it or soon after it, about the school year discussion for next year. I think the challenge on timing is that if we wait too long to make the decision sort of gets made for us, because preschool families will find places for their children for next year, because I think just about all the preschools I know in the area are open. Some close a little bit in December, but they're open. So I don't think there needs to be a vote tonight, but I do want to note that from a timeline perspective, things are going to get tight. So I think we probably do need to make a decision, even if the decision is let's see if we can get people to enroll. Like, I don't know what that decision looks like next month. But I think that's the variable, separate from the financial, separate from, what's our program look like? Do we have an agreement to move forward? All those other things. If we decide in May we'd like to open the preschool, I fear we won't have enough students to make it worthwhile. So I'm not pushing to vote tonight. That's not where I was going. But I think there are real timeline, just logistical, practical concerns about that.
Yes, agreed. Yep. Ron, go ahead.
If you want to wait a month, it's fine by me, but I don't think the decision is going to change any.
Right. Yeah. No. And yes. We originally, I think we're going to do it in March, and I was the one that was like, no, let's do it in February. Let's get it on the agenda in February. Right. I guess, Lee, I'm sort of putting you on the spot here. So, as a practical perspective, it seems like it could be challenging, even if we were to be able to tell you what K through 6 would look like in March. That seems like that would be hard then to kind of figure out enrollment for the preschool for the fall. Is that fair?
I think that's fair. Because we're talking about a few different things. We're talking about staffing. So figuring out the logistics of who the adults would be, who would be working with the children, the programming, and what that's going to look like, the physical safety constraints, and what that's going to look like, and then how we're going to be supportive of very young children in a if we're in person in the fall in a building with much older children who may have different physical safety parameters. I don't know how well 2 and 3-year-olds do with masks, but all those little minutia of logistical things to really be figuring out and then creating that plan collaboratively with staff, which is the way I'd like to do it. All of that is going to take time. And then the other piece is around, ensuring that the program would be financially viable and I'll echo what Mike said, that, some families have reached out to me to ask if the program is going to be open. And pretty much everyone has said, we're looking at programs in the area. We're trying to make our plans for the fall. I think families are really trying to plan now. So whatever you want me to do, I will make it work. If you tell me in June that we're running a preschool, we will figure out a way to do it. But I think to really do it well takes time, and to collaborate takes time. So as much time as you can give us to do things well would be great. But so that's just my 2 cents. I don't know if I answered your question.
No, you did. And I know it was a hard question, but no, I appreciate your honesty about that. Brenda, go ahead.
Okay, so I guess I have a couple questions, but the first one, I guess, is more for us just to think about. If, K through 6 weren't in the building, would any of us, would we want to consider having pre-K in the building? Because it seems like we'd need to make the decision to get the families sooner to be financially viable.
Wait, so sorry, just to clarify the question, meaning if K through 6 were not in the building, having a preschool that did use the building?
Yes.
I think if all of K through 6 were not in the building, we would not be able to do that, right? That would mean that there was something else in place where for some reason it was not allowed, and then that would also apply to preschool.
Because of staffing and union issues, or?
I think
I'm just trying to figure out, how can we make this decision before we can actually make the decisions about fall for the regular group of kids? It just seems like putting the cart before the horse, or?
Yep, Mike.
Yeah, so I think it's a great point. I think what we're running into is that you've got multiple sets of decisions, and the one around preschool needs to be really timely, and it's hard. I think this was Lee. I don't want to put words into Lee's mouth, but what I got from what Lee said, not her words, but what I interpreted or what I learned, was that there's some decisions that can't wait till other decisions happen, and preschool may be one of those decisions. So if we have everything over, we know our K-6 program in May, even if there's a conversation tonight, knowing really what the program is, that's going to be too late to make a decision on preschool. So I think that's where we're running into some logistical problems. It's not for lack of interest or dedication, but to commit to it for families who are looking for a place for their 3 and 4 and 5-year-old, we need to be able to commit to it. And so that's hard to fully commit to until we have lots of other things figured out. And I think that's where I think we're struggling. And to Mr. Munoz's point, that's why I wouldn't suggest that any permanent decision happens now. But I think that's where we struggle, because the reality is programming a preschool, especially during COVID times, is no small feat. And people are going to ask a lot of questions. If I was a prospective parent, even if Lee's like, yeah, we'll be in person next year, and they've got, parents guardians and caretakers would want to have a lot of questions, and we may not have answers in time for them to actually feel good about registering their kid. And I think that's the conflict that we're facing, is not a dedication or lack of dedication to the program, but how do we make which decisions when, and they're all contingent on each other. And that's where in a tough fiscal time, that's where we're struggling about, what's the level of risk that we'd have if we commit to the program and can't actually fill the program. Like, what happens with that? We've already committed to staff. So I don't know if that helped at all, but I think that's where we're all feeling there's the cognitive dissonance for Lee and myself, I would say, because not for these issues, we'd be in the middle of planning now, but we can't pretend that those issues aren't there. They're real, and that's where we're struggling.
Okay. Sarah Bass, go ahead.
So we're looking at this, or maybe I should use my I sentences, right? I'm looking at this more as a continuation of our hiatus from last year, because we cannot necessarily offer full-time, in-person, high quality preschool program like we did pre-COVID times, right? This is just a continuation of our COVID hiatus. Is that more like along the lines of what we're thinking about? Okay, well then, I feel like I can vote on it.
I could vote on it as well.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right. Any other questions or anything before that?
It's just one clarifying question.
Of course.
So the budget that we just discussed, am I correct in thinking that there was no preschool expenses in that budget?
Right.
That's correct. Yeah. And the preschool was always intended to be self-sufficient. So if there was expenses, there would be, the tuition would offset it.
Mm-hmm.
So if the committee wants to make a different decision, we can do that. The staff notification deadlines, that's where it gets a little tricky for us, because once we commit to staff on April 1st or April 15th, I always get mixed up. I apologize. Like we commit to them, and I think that's where it gets a little tricky for us in terms of having everything sorted out by that date.
Okay. All right. I will take a motion on the preschool.
I think nobody wants to make this motion.
I know.
So I will bite the bullet and say, I move that we extend our preschool COVID hiatus for another school year with a exceptionally very, very heavy heart. This is yucky, more yucky COVIDness, but I guess that is my motion. Extend our preschool COVID hiatus.
All right.
Second.
All right. Moved by Kenny, seconded by Stancer. Any further discussion? Okay, so we'll do a roll call vote. Ron.
Menino, aye.
Sarah Bess.
Kenny, I very sadly.
Okay. Margaret.
Stancer, aye.
And Brenda.
Barlow, aye.
And Hall, aye. All right. Thank you, everyone. Okay. Next up, volunteer return to in-person learning update.
So we're going to speak to this a lot more on Tuesday night at the joint meeting. But I think the short story is we had been assured a survey to all Pelham staff about their interest in returning around March 1st. And at this point, we're still compiling the data, and there's some conditionals, because there's a comment section. So we're sorting through what was intended by some of the comments to make sure we really understand what staff intend to do. And we'll have a lot more to share on Tuesday night. So I think we can keep this agenda point, if it's okay with the committee, pretty brief, because you'll get a much more thorough presentation on Tuesday.
Okay. Yeah, and so the thinking being that does Tuesday give enough time to, you will have gone through by then, and we'll have numbers and okay. Yep. Okay. Thank you. Okay. Capital plan. We did 2021, 2022 school year discussion. So relevant to many other agenda items tonight. And I had sent around a proposed motion that you'll note says, Mike, could you pull it up really quickly? So this motion was discussed at the regional school committee meeting on Tuesday. And was shared with me, and this item will be on the agenda at our joint meeting next Tuesday. So we wanted to have a chance to discuss it now. So just that to the extent that vaccines are available and public health guidelines are adhered to, and we would change this obviously to Pelham Public School, would provide full-time in-person learning for the 2021-2022 school year, and that the superintendent would manage this in collaboration with public health officials. So the question of kind of why talk about this now, why bring up this motion now, from our other, and actually, Mike, I think probably we can take it down so we can see each other. Clearly in terms of very specific to Pelham, our ongoing financial viability depends on increased school choice enrollment. And I think if we are going to attract school choice families, they need to know what the plan is for the next school year. We also saw from the one public comment, certainly that is not a survey of all families, but so anecdotal information that families are right now in the process of having to make really difficult choices, and private schools or charter schools or school choice applications for other districts, now's the time when families are considering those. And that, I think to show that we are making some progress, that we're focused on in-person learning as much as possible for next calendar year, I think could be important. So for tonight, it's more just discussing this language. We're not voting on it, but again, it will come up at our joint meeting and will possibly be voted on then. And I wasn't at, nor did I watch the joint meeting. So I don't know, Sarah, Beth, or Margaret, if there's any parts of that discussion that came up that you'd want to share here that are relevant, or if other folks have questions or comments.
I don't think I have anything necessarily to bring forward from that. I think the concern is similar at the regional level when we think about who might come back or who might not come back next year. I guess that's really all I have to say about what we talked about. Sarah Beth?
The only other thing I have written down is that how inefficient it is to run parallel programs, to have both in-person and virtual, and that when we're already at a place where finances are crunched, and that we just don't have the money to run both.
Sure. Yeah. Right. Yeah, Margaret.
So one question that has come to my mind, or maybe something, Mike, that you could speak to a little bit since the meeting the other night, is how does this tie into negotiations with the union? I know that the MOA ends in June. So what happens with all of that for next year? Do you have any ideas?
So as you noted, the memorandum of agreement ends on June 30th. It's only for the current school year. And I think, even for my I think I'm trying to be cautious of not negotiating in public. And that's why I'm being really, trying to think about what I want to say before I say it. I think the motion as written sets a clear directive to me, as well as the negotiating team, on perhaps what's non-negotiable in negotiations. That's probably as much as I will can say. It's an awkward worded sentence, I know, but I think
that helps me. Thank you.
Okay. Yep, Ron. Yep, go ahead, Ron.
Well, I'm not on the negotiating team. I think it's important to support the motion, only because the public wants to know what's going to happen in the fall. Passage of this motion would indicate that's what we want to happen. As far as the vaccine is concerned, all teachers should be vaccinated by the second week of March. I had my first shot. I'm 80. But the teachers were put below 65-year-olds. But those people should all be taken care of by around the first week of March. So teachers and staff are in the cohort that follows 65-year-olds. They should all be taken care of in terms of vaccinations by the second shot comes April. So that they will be protected. Plus, we have all those protocols in place. We have all those thousands of masks that were given to us, the headgear that was given to us, the hand sanitizer that we purchased, the ventilation program that's been taking place. I think it'll be a safe learning environment. And I think it's important so more Pelham parents don't send their kids to private school, to let them know right away that the school committee supports full in-person learning as of September. But that's just my opinion.
Okay, thanks, Ron. Brenda.
Just to add to that, we may only have had one public comment tonight, but just anecdotally, I know several other families who are really struggling and they really care about Pelham and they really want to stay at Pelham. And I think acknowledging that we've had a rough year, acknowledging that we're committed to in-person learning in fall would go a long way for a lot of families and could really make a huge difference.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, I think of, go ahead, Mike. No, you can go first.
Okay, so just two things. One, on the vaccine timeline, I don't know if you saw, the government said today that they've good news on the vaccine is that vaccines is that what was thought to be 300 million people in America would have doses by the end of August is now the end of July. And another point that was supposed to be the end of June is now the end of May. So production seems like it's ramping up. I mean, in Massachusetts, I saw that, we've about 1 million, a little less, 900 some odd thousand people have been vaccinated, and 250,000 were in the last 7 days. So we are seeing a pretty significant uptick in that, and educators were like 2 groups away. I was on a conference call with DESE today, and they talked about that timeline. I think, folks should feel confident. I feel confident. I shouldn't say folks should. I feel confident that the vaccine will be available to all educators, and I think just about all adults, from what we're hearing today from the Biden administration, well before September. And I think that the other point I just want to make is that I'm trying to be really careful in my language, and I'm not trying to correct anyone's language, but I think people have the opportunity to be vaccinated. I can't guarantee that everyone will be vaccinated. And there's a real significant distinction there. I know from hospitals and other settings where there was an assumption that almost everyone would want to get vaccinated. And what they've found in Massachusetts is that, they're about 80% right, but they're not 100% right. And I know people locally who work in our local hospitals here in Springfield and Northampton who have indicated that. So I just want to caution us that I think everyone will have the opportunity to be vaccinated in terms of the adults. But we can't guarantee that, and I'll leave it there.
Okay. Yep, Sarah Best.
I don't have the language in front of me anymore, but I think it says the opportunity, right? So it's okay. Mm-hmm. Great.
Yeah.
Thank you.
The language has been made available. That's the language in there. Yep.
Yeah, I mean, so, and I think that it is, signaling to the community, the existing community, but also I think giving Lee the ability to, as she gets phone calls, that she can say, this is what the priority is. And by the way, we have awesome ventilation. Have you seen our gym? And we have this really great Let's Talk curriculum, and people love it. It's like, I don't mean to make you out to be like some super salesy, like you're an educator and an administrator. So, but, I think it can help. I don't think people are just going to flock to Pelham only because of Let's Talk, but I think that this could also send a message and would give would give you, Lee, a little kind of armor to be able to say that these are the things we care about, safety for sure, but also these other things. Okay, well, so again, it will be on the agenda on Tuesday to be discussed further and in the joint setting. All right, anything else on that? Okay, warrants. I have 2 tonight. I authorized by my signature to payroll in the amount of $58,332.82. And that was dated February 10th, 2021. And I signed it on February 5th, 2021. And I authorized by my signature to payables in the amount of $7,032.44 for the warrant dated February 10th, 2021. That included general fund expenses of $3,754.48, grant fund expenses of $1,220.96, and $2,057 from an FY 2021 article that's referred to as other fund. And I signed that on February 10th. That's it for warrants. We do not have any. Oh, wait, do we? No, we, I know there is a gift, but it's not, well, it's not on here. Maybe it just hasn't gone through the treasurer's office yet. Is that possible?
It is possible. And if you get in touch with Doug, he can give you, and I can do it for you, but he can give you a more clear answer on that.
Okay, no, I can check in with him. So it'll get on for next month. Okay, so stay tuned for a gift next month. And that is it. So I will take a motion to adjourn. I'll make a motion to adjourn. I move to adjourn the Pelham School Committee meeting.
Second.
Move my Hall, seconded by Stanton. No further discussion. Okay, Ron.
Menino, aye.
Sarah Best.
Kenny, aye.
Margaret.
Stancer, aye.
Brenda.
Barlow, aye.
And Hall, aye. We are adjourned. Thank you so much, everybody. Have a good night.